Okay, hi everyone, this is Max. This is from Spring 2015, CS61A. So we're doing something a little bit different this time. I just made a bunch of videos talking about the scheme discussion, but I figured I would throw in something that's relevant, sort of a final exam question that's relevant, so that you can give it some practice outside of discussion. So if you're watching this and you haven't already tried them, take 5 minutes now. Sort of pause the video. Take a few minutes now to give each of these questions a shot, and then come back and you can go over them. We'll go over them together. Okay. Okay. All right. So hopefully you've given each of these a shot, and it's asking us what would the STK scheme interpreter print in response to the following lines of scheme code. So here we're also going to, you can sort of, for the intents and purposes of Spring 2015, you can replace all of this with SCM, what is staff SCM print. All right, so we're looking at scheme, right? And scheme has got this sort of strange thing where we need to, it's actually not that strange, but since we have our functions coming at the beginning, it's sort of, students seem to get a little bit confused about how do I even approach something like this? And it's exactly like we would do it in Python. So when we're evaluating functions in Python, what do? Well, first we evaluate our operator, which in this case is cons. We know what cons is, we just do a lookup on it. Next we evaluate each of our arguments. Let's evaluate cons 1 and 2. How is scheme going to print this? Well, scheme is going to write this as 1.2. This is just a simple pair. This dot is important, right, because we're not following it with a nil list. We have this dot here, and now we're going to write. So now we need to evaluate this whole thing. How do we evaluate this thing? Well, we're going to evaluate our operator here. We'll evaluate each of our operands. 3, we don't need to evaluate. Cons, we don't need to evaluate. And now we'll evaluate this right here. This is going to evaluate this cons 4, 5. We'll evaluate cons, evaluate 4, and evaluate 5. We know what each of those are. This is going to evaluate to 4.5. Okay? And now we're consing this with 3 at the beginning, so 3.4.5, and now we're consing this again with our. Now we're finally at our outermost function call, and now we can cons it like this. Okay, well this is a little strange. This is not what scheme actually looks like when we print this out, and now you just need to remember your trick, which is to go through at the very end and clean up any of these period parentheses that you see. So we see these period parentheses, and whenever we see a period followed immediately by a parenthesis, we can erase the period and erase the parenthesis, and then erase the matching parenthesis on the right side. And again, so we've done that here. We don't see any. Oh, we see one right here after the 3. I can erase the period, erase the parenthesis, and erase the matching parenthesis. And now we just need to make them look a little bit closer together. And we can get something that looks like 1 period 2, 3, 4 period 5, and parentheses. Okay, so that was part A. Let's go ahead and move on to part B. Same sort of thing. So first things first, we'll evaluate our operator. We know what cutter is, and then we can evaluate. We have one operand. Woo! Huge operand. Let's evaluate this in order. We know what our operator cons is. We'll evaluate list. This is equal to 1, 2, 3. We'll evaluate another list, 4, 5, 6. We'll cons them together. We'll write this. But now we're calling cutter on it, right? And cutter of something that looks like this is going to return the second element. If this is the card, then this must be the cutter. So this is going to return the list 4, 5, 6. There. And just a reminder, I can't do it as well as John Cocker. Try this again. All right. Okay, wow. This is a doozy. So how do we even approach this? Well, let's we can proceed by looking at, just continuing as we did up here. We'll sort of evaluate each of our operators until we finally reach operator and operands, till we finally reach the smallest atomic expression where we know what each of our operators are and each of our operands. Then we'll sort of draw out a chart to see how we do things, and just sort of break it up, take it one piece at a time, right? Okay. So just trust me on this, that if you evaluate each of these, you sort of look and I say, okay, well, I know what this cutter is. I need to know what I need to evaluate now this full operand. The smallest thing that you can get down to is this thing right here, this list 678. Okay. So let's construct 678. We know what that looks like in scheme. It's going to look like 678. And what is it going to look like in sort of box and pointer notation, which is how we'll approach getting this cutter. So we look at this cutter and we say, okay, well, if you know how to do this well, then it might be easy to you, but otherwise you're sort of like, oh, well, shoot, there's no period here. I'm not exactly sure what the rest of this list is. So let's think about what this actually looks like. So this is actually going to look like the following. 6, 7, 8, right? Where 8 ends with a null pointer, or something that ends with a nil right at the end. Okay, so if I want the cutter of this list is just really referring to this first element right here. So if I want the cutter, what I'm really getting is what this element points to, which is the rest of the list. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward from here. You sort of get what this is, so I'm going to remove this 6, and I'm going to say now I've evaluated this whole thing. Alright. Okay, so I've done that. Now, what's my next step? Well, now, so I need to evaluate what list of this list and this 9 is equal to. Well, okay, so this is equal to, so this is going to equal, this is the car of the first element. So I'm going to have something that is 7, 8, nil. And then, since it's using list, I'm just going to implicitly make a cutter that has this second element 9 as the car of my cutter, right? And then this is going to point to a nil. Okay, so now we've evaluated up till here, and we've got something that looks kind of like this, right? List, another list that's 7, 8, looks like this, and finally 9 here. Okay, it's important that you keep track of where your parentheses are at, right? So I've evaluated, actually, I sort of overshot it there. I've evaluated up until there. Okay, so now I'm making a list that has each of these elements as the car of their respective elements. So let's see how that actually looks. This might be a little non-intuitive to people, but so we're going to have something whose first element is a 3 and points to something. Its first element is a 4 that points to something whose first element points to this list right here, and then ends, right? So it's important to know that list is going to create something that's car is that's first element is going to be whatever item we have here. So these are each the first element of their respective little pairs. Okay, so now we've evaluated to here, and I can extend this a little bit. Okay, so now I need to take the cutter of this, and then the cutter of whatever that returns. So how do we do that? Well, the cutter of this whole thing is going to be the second element of this pair, which is going to refer to this right here. So I've handled up to here. Also, just to be clear, the way this looked before was 3, 4, and then this. Okay, so now I've handled up to here, so I've dealt with this. Oops. Now I need to take the cutter of whatever this is. I'll extend that, and I'll say, okay, well, the cutter of this is just equal to whatever this points to, which is this right here. All right, and now we've done the whole thing. And so we're done with this. We've got 3 open parentheses. We've got a list whose first element is a list, whose first element is a list that it has as its first element 7 and second element 8, and has a second element here, which is 9. Okay, and this is going to end up looking like 7, 8, 9. Hey. All right, great. So if you have any questions about this, please leave a comment on Piazza, or post on Piazza, or comment on YouTube, and we'll get your questions answered. Thanks for watching.